Good afternoon. I'm very pleased and I wish to be here today, and I wish to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to come back to Istanbul and to have the opportunity to be in contact with such a qualified audience. I am been working in Turkey, assisting Turkish companies for many years, and also working with the Turkish Steel Exporter Association, so I'm quite familiar with your business. And today I've been asked to share with you some thoughts about trade defense and protectionism, especially with regard to relationship between Europe and Turkey. We all know that it's a very special and particular moment. We are facing an unexpected situation. We all know that there are new challenges, new situations which were unknown to us, especially coming from the American side. But all this should not bring us to ignore and overlook what are the main risks and implications for Turkish companies in this period. I have divided my presentation in two main macro areas. One which is related to the recent piece of legislation, which is the Clean Industrial Act of the European Commission, which focuses on the new challenges regarding environment and sustainability, which has a lot of implication for the steel industry. And secondly, the action plan on steel and metals, which was adopted, the communication which was issued on 19 March, which contains several important developments and news for the Turkish steel industry. First of all, I mean, I would like to emphasize that the shape of the EU policy is changing dramatically, while trade defense instruments, so dumping, countervailing, and safeguard, still play a crucial role. New emerging legislations are becoming equally important. So the implications of all these, also for the Turkish steel industry, is to adapt the new legislation in order to keep the possibility of exporting and penetrating the European market. And all this brings together the need for the steel industry to be aware of such big developments. In a nutshell, the Clean Industrial Deal is a new communication by which the Commission has indicated its main target to achieve decarbonization of the industry, and in particular to, let's say, indicate the goal regarding the energy-intensive industries, including steel and aluminium, which are fundamental for the industrial growth. There are three main pillars in the Clean Industrial Act of importance to the Turkish companies. First of all, very briefly, there is a new notion of bilateral agreement, which is called the Clean Trade and Investment Partnership. So there is a new, an instrument which complements the FTA, the bilateral agreements, which the European Union has in force, in order to focus on clean energy and decarbonization. So in the bilateral and regional agreements, there will be a special area focusing on energy and decarbonization. Secondly, and it is quite important, regarding CBAM, the Commission is reconsidering the carbon border adjustment mechanism. As you know, as from next year, the importers will have to fill certain requirements in order to clear the goods in Europe. The main development is that the European Commission is narrowing down the scope of application of CBAM. Narrowing down in a way which would allow more than 90% of importers to be taken out of the scope of application. It's quite important because the Commission has studied that still, if, let's say, 90% of importers will be taken out, still 99% of the CBAM goods will be covered. So there will be a huge impact on small players. The Commission set a threshold, so importers clearing less than 50 tons per year will be out. So this is a quite important development because it will make the instrument more friendly, taking out of its scope a large number of small players which would have been dramatically affected by the heavy burden of this regulation. Third, and this is going to, let's say, pave the way for the matter of greater interest to you, the Clean Deal Act indicates that there are a number of instruments which will be further developed, including the possibility of adjusting tariffs. So the Commission is considering also, as a result of the current international climate, to increase the customs duty. As you know, based on Article 28 of the GATT, it's possible to reconsider, renegotiate the customs duty. Currently, Europe has a quite low customs duty, but in order to cope with the risk of deflection of trade, especially as a result of the American measures, the Commission is considering to adjust, to increase the tariff. But the most important piece of legislation which may be applicable to Turkish companies is the strengthening of the trade defense instruments, so mainly dumping, countervailing, and safeguard. Having completed this, let's say, short presentation about the Clean Deal, I will move to what is probably of most interest to you, so the action plan on steel and metals, which was issued on March 19, so less than a month ago, and which is a communication especially focusing on the steel and metal sector of Europe. This act has 6 pillars. The second and third pillars are of greatest interest to Turkish companies. Let me explain why. The second pillar deals in more detail about CBAM, and here I summarize the main statements, the same positions that the Commission has announced. First of all, the CBAM, which, as we know, replaced free allowances under the EU ETS system, will be, as I said, there will be a reduction of the scope of addressee. Moreover, there will be a reduction of the quarterly emissions thresholds. The threshold for certificates to be held each quarter decreased from 80% to 50%. So this is, again, a way to simplify the application of this instrument. Moreover, on the other hand, together with simplification, there will be a strengthening of the instrument, particularly to address risks of circumvention. The conclusion, quite obvious, at which the Commission arrived is that if you target raw material under CBAM, there is a risk that imports will move downstream. So if you apply CBAM to aluminium and steel, you may see that those materials will come to the market in a dishwasher, washing machine, or other. So the idea of the Commission is to go downstream in order to cover, let's say, the whole vertical chain of products, rather than remain just on the raw material level. So that is basically the main idea. The third pillar, instead, focuses in particular with trade defense instruments. And there we can find some very interesting statements made by the Commission. First of all, the Commission announced that it will change its practice regarding the existence of injury. As you know, until now, in order to start a case, the Commission normally had to receive evidence that imports from a certain country caused material injury. Now, as the Commission is taking a more, I would say, aggressive or more responsive attitude, it's now announced that it will base more investigation on whether there is a threat of injury. So whether there is a possibility prospectively that imports from a certain country may cause injury. It's something which is already contemplated by the law, but so far it was very rarely used. So the Commission announced that this will be a main change. Moreover, the Commission will launch stronger market surveillance, and there will be also sharpening of the existence TDI. For example, there might be some modification regarding the lesser duty rule, which, as you know, is a device of the European system by which anti-dumping duties will be set on the basis of the lowest between dumping and injury margin. And also the Commission announced that it will keep under control markets other than steel, like, for example, aluminium, where the Commission announced that it will start very soon a safeguard investigation, and also the copper market, which, according to the Commission, is exposed to the risk as a result of the initiation of a 232 investigation in the US. So these are all aspects which the Commission announced in the Steel and Metal Plan. In this chart, I depicted the measures currently in force against Turkish companies. So we have currently coils, hot rolled coils, which are against the Turkish producers with duties between 7.3 and 4.7%. Importantly, these measures are due to expire next year, in July 2026. Those cases, those measures were also challenged before the court by the first application for annulment was rejected by the court. Then we have a second case, second measures in force against corrosion-resistant steels, and with duties from 2.4 to 36.6. with measures due to expire in 2 years, and a recent third case, which was initiated last month, again, cast iron articles. The investigation is ongoing. Moreover, you have anti-circumvention measures imposed against stainless steel coils, by which a duty of 20.5% has been adopted against Turkey, and finally the same case on cold rolled flat products. So this is in a nutshell the picture about existing measures, and I want now, I'm almost approaching the end of my intervention, highlight some important developments which I have learned in my practice. First of all, we can see that there is a more wide use of safeguard instruments on the part of the Commission. We have seen that there is safeguard measures on steel, which have been recently revised and which are due to be enforced until June 2026. And the Commission already announced that at the end of the safeguard measures on steel, it plans adopting new measures. It's still unclear what will be the legal basis, but we can expect that there will be some kind of continuation of protective measures against steel overall. Second, there was in December a new investigation on certain alloying elements against all countries, including Turkey. We expect the conclusion of this investigation in November 25. Finally, it has been announced a new safeguard investigation on aluminium, which the Commission indicated will be initiated very soon. So this shows that safeguard, which used to be in the past a quite an instrument quite rarely used is becoming of large application. I also prepared a slide to summarize the main changes regarding the safeguard measures on steel. I think you are already quite familiar, but if not, you can certainly have a look at this slide, which will be available for distribution. And I want, before concluding, I want to discuss a bit with you an important change in the practice of the European Commission, which can be of huge impact. It is what I called in these slides the new trends in origin and non-preferential origin and duties. So we have had for many decades a clear certain point, which was basically the rules governing the origin of goods. So if there was a transformation made in Turkey, and that transformation was substantial, so was made with a number of activities which allow to fall in the notion of last substantial transformation, we could conclude that those goods acquired Turkish origin. That was an important pillar for business, because for importers, they must know when they import a product, what is the origin, and accordingly, the applicable tax, customs, and duty regime. In the last 3-4 years, I've seen that this certainty, this strong and clear rule, has been changing progressively. First, there has been a more wide use of anti-circumvention application within the anti-dumping and CVD legislation. For example, the case that I mentioned before about imports of stainless steel hot roll coils from Turkey, coils made in Turkey on the basis of slabs from Indonesia. If you transform slab into coil in Turkey, you are changing the HS code. So in principle, the goods acquire Turkish origin, but the Commission quashed this conclusion on the basis of the applicable provision, Article 13 of the dumping regulation. So this situation was also replicated in the similar investigation on cold-rolled steel, the same concept, hot roll coil coming from Indonesia to Turkey, processed into cold, acquiring Turkish origin, but the origin was quashed on the basis of Article 13 of the anti-dumping regulation. So the first trend is the Article 13 of dumping regulation. But it's not all. We also have a second trend, which is based on a different provision of the customs code, Article 33 of the delegated regulation. Article 33 gives the customs authority the possibility to derogate from the rules governing non-preferential origin if there is evidence that transformation in a country was made in order to avoid the application of duties. So if the customs find evidence that you moved transformation in Turkey in order to pay a lower duty or to skip the payment of duties, and there is no economic justification for the operation, the customs authority may disapply, may derogate from the application of the non-preferential origin rules and give the origin of the country which contributed with the more raw material. So the danger of this approach is that importers may find themselves with the risk of retrospective collection of the duties for the previous years. So that is extremely dangerous and important. So what is fundamental for the business for business with Europe is that you may be in a position to explain why a certain transformation was made in Turkey, the economic justification. The situation may become even worse, and now I move to the next slide, if the announced melted and poured rule will be implemented. So in the metal and steel plan, the Commission announced that it will proceed with the adoption of this melted and poured rule. So the idea underlying this rule is that that the origin, for the purpose of TDI, at least, the origin will be given by the country where the steel was melted. And then the same origin will follow down the chain. However, if you read the plan, you found the sentence, the Commission explains this, the need for this rule with a view to counteracting what she calls minor transformation. So again, the key point, which is unclear, is whether the Commission will make subject to the melted and pour rule only operation which imply a minor transformation, or will, and I think this will be quite brutal, quite difficult to accept, whether they will extend this rule to all steel products regardless of the importance of the transformation process. In my view, it's impossible. It would be hard to believe that the Commission may completely overlook that some activities are more significant than others in the steel downstream process. But this is still to be seen. So I also had some slides on a different topic, sanctions, but this is nothing new. I just included for the sake of discussion and completeness. So basically, as you know, there are prohibition for the transformation in Turkey of steel billets downstream, but covered by HS code 7207, while for steel slabs covered by HS 7207-1210, there is a prohibition starting from October 1st, 28. So this is basically, I mean, I think that I am almost approaching the end of my intervention time. So I also include a slide on another hot topic, which is the announced limitation that the Commission made on the export of scrap. Again, it's unclear how this will be governed in particular, in detail, but the Commission announced that by, let's say, September, by the third quarter, so by July, August, the Commission will may implement measures to limit the export of scraps from Europe. So I try to give you an overview in 20 minutes of what are the main developments which may affect or which will affect the trade between Turkey and Europe regarding steel and metal industry. I am, of course, open to take any question you may have, and I wish to thank you for your attention.
Fabrizio, for the presentation. Do we have any questions from the floor? Yeah.
Fabrizio, thank you very much for this presentation. One practical question. We are importing into Turkey hot rolled coil. It's being cold produced and galvanized, then being exported to Europe. So that means I'm clearing the goods in Antwerp, and then the question is, if they are saying, okay, it's circumvention, what duty will I pay? Actually on hot rolled coil or on galvanized? And then, of course, what do I have to present? Do I have to ask for the bill for the hot rolled coil paid by the Turkish importer, or what will be the basis? And how do I have to prove?
Yes, so here the issue is not really on the, classification, but on the origin. So in your examples, you are galvanizing, if I say this theoretical example, let's say galvanizing product in Turkey and exporting to Europe, and you import the, let's say, the raw material from a third country. So the key question here is, first of all, is there a duty on the similar galvanized product in the third country? Because the logic that the Commission and Customs are pursuing is, why are you galvanizing in Turkey? Because maybe there is a duty on the same product galvanized in China, for example? If there were to be the case, then the Commission and Customs might say, oh, you are then buying coil from China, galvanizing in Turkey, in order to skip the duty that would be applicable on Chinese galvanized. But there, you have to ask yourself the question, okay, how can I, that is the key point, to have a business justification behind it, because maybe there won't be any investigation, but if there is an investigation, then the key point for your defense, your lawyers could help you only if you have prepared ahead a business plan to say, okay, I import coil from China to Turkey, not because I want to skip the duty against China, but because there is an issue regarding technical specification, there is availability, timing of delivery, so something which could be used in case of an investigation, either based on Article 13 of dumping legislation or on Article 33 of the, as explained before, of the customs code, which is even more dangerous because they can go retrospectively and ask your importer to pay the duties for the last years.
Sorry to be a pain in the neck, but
please, you're welcome.
Then let's say in case that I cannot present a proper case and it's just being imported galvanized and they're saying, okay, you are replacing the importation of galvanized from China. Will I then fall under the other countries? Because, I mean, China for corrosion resistance has, of course, the manufacturer-specific duties, and then on top, of course, the others.
I'm talking about safeguard now.
No. I'm talking about the anti-dumping duty.
Okay.
I mean, because this is actually how I understand actually the melted and poured is also circumvention of anti-dumping, anti-subsidy duties.
Yes, you're right.
CBAM comes on top. So, but that means basically, do I then fall under the other countries?
Yes. You would be caught in that theoretical example under the so-called residual duty applicable to Chinese companies. Because the idea is that you are not company A, B, and C, which got specific, you are company Z in Turkey. It's a public case. Let's take the case of the anti-circumvention investigation on stainless steel hot rolled coils, okay? Çolakoglu participated, so it's not a secret, it's an imported slabs and rolled the slabs into coils here. And the Commission concluded that there was, according to the Commission, now I know that there is a case before the court, but according to the Commission, the conclusion was that this operation in Turkey was only driven by the goal to not to pay the duty on Indonesian coils, which was the other company's duty was, I think, 17 or 18%. So as a result, the imports of the goods from Çolakoglu to Europe were caught by this 18, 19% duty. That is basically the logic of the system. Moreover, it can happen that the customs say, the Commission has done this investigation for the future because anti-circumvention is prospective. But what about the past? And that is very painful because your importers will be exposed to the recovery of duties when the goods is already sold 2 years later, plus sanctions, plus interest. That can bring companies to bankruptcy.
And this is going back how long?
This depends on the rule under the customs code is 3 years. But these 3 years can be extended depending on national legislation. It's quite complicated. So if there is a criminal aspect, can go up to 10 years in some cases. In France, it can be 10 years. So every country has its own rule, but minimum 3 years, but can be longer. I don't want to ruin your appetite for lunch, but that was just what I want just to tell you because it's quite delicate. Please, please.
We have another question.
Hello. We are a service center and we only buy Turkish material. I buy, let's say, HRC from Turkish mills, cut to length, and export to Europe. They will ask me, is this Turkish? As far as I know, it's Turkish. But how would I know that it's poured in Turkey, or is it rolled from slab, imported slab? What shall I do?
So you are doing cut to length of coils?
Yes.
And those coils
are from Turkey.
The coils are made from Turkey.
Yes.
So what is the question is
it poured in Turkey, melted and poured, or from imported slab? I don't know, but I buy from a Turkish mill.
But there, I mean, this matter may have a different implication. Sanctions, because you must be in a position to verify whether the slabs are made in China.
How can I know?
Sorry, in Russia or in Belarus. There is, as you know, when the Commission extended the application of sanctions, I think with the 14 package, if I'm not wrong, they say that transformation in third countries will be caught by sanction if both the raw material and downstream material are covered by Annex 17 of the regulation. So first obligation from the perspective of sanction law. Second, due diligence from the perspective of what I said before, so the risk of anti-circumvention, because let me give you another example again, concrete, pipes. There is a duty of 90% against welded pipes from China. It's there for many years, so it's quite... Now, theoretically, if you are importing Chinese coils, and I think many pipe producers import Chinese coil, in theory, the Commission or customs could say, you are importing Chinese coil, producing pipes in Turkey. Pipes, after all, is a piece of coil, bended, welded, so raw material is the same raw material. In theory, maybe this is done because Chinese companies want to skip the payment of duties of 90%. Is a very remote risk because measures against the Chinese pipes have been enforced for many years, and I think that all pipe producers in Turkey would have plenty of economic justification to explain why they are buying coil from China. But again, I'm just flagging this to say that the trade world is becoming very slippery, and you may end up without knowing. So be careful about origin. When your shipping agent take a position, try to verify, because I have many clients who tell me, Fabrizio, 3 years ago we used origin of Macedonia, for example, and that was Greece, so you are now in trouble with the quota. Because, again, another problem, if you are not using the right origin and later the customs make a check, they will withdraw the benefit of a certain quota. So, again, this can be very, very dangerous. So, again, I don't want to ruin your day and your appetite. I'm not here just to give you, let's say, flag and highlight problems. But I think that the business today requires a very careful and very meticulous checks of the different elements which make up the spectrum, the arena of trade measures. Please.
Fabrizio, thank you very much for all the information. I think what's becoming more important is traceability. So each company actually has to, he said, how do I know whether it was this slab or that slab? He has to ask that question. As a matter of fact, when he sells his, when he doesn't export his cut the length steel and gives it to an automotive part producer, that automotive part producer here in Turkey, before he exports it or she exports it to Europe, he needs to trace it all the way back. Yeah. Now, the main question is, yes, producers have to import, galvanizers, they have to import hot roll coil. They can't find the same quality or the capacity is not enough, whatever, a lot of things. So they do import. But what if they use for export purposes the domestic poured hot roll coil? How will EU justify this? But they also import from China, for instance, but they sell that in the domestic market. this is a very theoretical question because it's not possible because there's a high duty on the Chinese material and so on. But let's just take it at that. So I use Chinese product. I use domestic melt hot roll coil. I galvanize them both, but I use one of them for the domestic market and I export the other one. How will this be handled?
Yes, that is a good question. I think that there was a similar problem in the anti-circumvention case for cold rolled, because, you know, the rule regarding circumvention, there is a rule which is called 60-40. So in order to be caught by circumvention measures, the Commission must find that more than 60% of the materials used comes from China. Now, I think that if a company were to be able to prove, for example, having different warehouses, that the goods which is used for export to the EU are not originating from China and China goods is sold domestically, I think you may have a good defense because after all, the Commission assume that the goods are mixed and so they say, okay, but if you can prove that there are different channels, also different warehouses, then I think you may have a good defense to say, listen, I am exporting to Europe, not goods which were coming with raw material from China or from Indonesia, whatever. So I think that could be a good possibility. But I don't know how many companies have this kind of differences.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any more questions? I guess not. Thank you so much, Mr. Fabrizio.
So thanks again for your attention and have a good day.